Thank you very, very much for this invitation. And I'm very proud and so glad to be here again with the two academies that we are joining forces to do something together. And in my presentation, I will only make some, put some ideas of a program I'm organizing about the study of the moral development of children in the digital environment. As I can tell you very briefly some reflections, and of course I will be very thankful if you give me some feedback on the program I will start this year, I hope, and I will learn a lot with you. The idea is to understand the way children develop some moral codes in the digital environment. I spent several years in the 70s working with children. I was a student of Jean Piaget, and I did this work in Brazil. I'm from Argentina. How the children understood the way the traffic lights work. Why there's a light for forbidden, a green for permitted, and a yellow for attention. It was a great fun for me and my students to go with the children, since there were 4, 5, till 8, 9, to a city, and cross a street and ask about the traffic lights, which was a very simple manner to introduce what we call the deontic logic, the logic of the norms, like permitted, forbidden, etc. And we wrote a book on that, and even we received a prize for that. It was interesting because we started in the real place, and then we went to school to produce a maquette of the road and the lights. And there were some very funny answers. For instance, why the traffic light, or the red light, changes? And an answer for a kid was, well, perhaps it doesn't change, the chauffeur will be starving. And therefore, we understood the way the moral development of this traffic code or traffic laws developed. Piaget did a very important work on that in the early 30s, moral development of children, and then Kohlberg at Harvard, who was a dear colleague, did it for not only for children, but also adolescents and young people. And we should go to the adulthood and the retired persons now, who need also to learn a lot from the new digital environment. And therefore, my work on the deontic logic started with the real environment, natural environment or the cities. But now, since in the 80s at least, we have another environment that covers the globe, which is the digital environment. And it starts very early, and schools are already engaged in many places of the world. And I became the chief education officer of One Laptop per Child, an initiative by Nicolas Negroponte, who came here several times, in order to introduce computers in a very massive way, a very large scale. We distribute about 4 million computers in different countries. And one of the countries, Uruguay, which is a small country in Latin America, but very well developed in a sense, they accepted the idea to give to every kid and to every student in secondary schools and technical schools, and of course to every teacher for free, a laptop or a tablet connected to the internet. Then all the public schools, all the students and teachers of the public schools of Uruguay, about 700,000, do have connectivity, and then they own a computer. Nowadays, another step is coming in this place in Uruguay. All retired persons have the right to receive also a tablet, which is a great and very important step, because education doesn't stop, it still continues. And the digital environment is very important because it has no limits of age at all. Therefore, I had the idea, and this is only a metaphor, to study the traffic lights of the internet. Should we have some equivalent of a traffic light in the internet, how children use the internet, the web, the connectivity, the cell phones? What are the notions of forbidden, permitted, or obligatory there? I have no idea. I have revised the whole, I think, most of the papers and publications on ethics and robotics and artificial intelligence, and really I didn't find real experimental work on the moral development of children in the digital environment. And you know, and the digital environment is essential, but is already contaminated, like the natural environment, and we need to take care of that. At this academy, we have done a very nice work with Pierre Ledin and others, and about the education for a sustainable environment. But now we need the similar thing for a sustainable digital environment. You know that the environment is a very concern of all of us. Pope Francis wrote this magnificent encyclical about Laudato Si. And I hope that someday we will have a Laudato Si for the digital environment too. Why not? This is the question, and I would like to have your impressions. And my idea is now to produce a program at a very large scale. I have started to talk to people as I'm advisor to the Plan Ceibal in Uruguay in order to start to analyze this problem. It's like a vaccination. You should do some clinical trials, but once you have discovered a vaccine, you must vaccinate everyone. Therefore, the change of scale makes a great modification in our experience. One thing is to study a small school with, 100 children. Another one is to work with 1 million children. And this will be we hope to do, have a very large scale experiment, not experiment, vaccination, I would say, if you mind these metaphors. The problem in science sometimes is, I think, to go from a metaphor to an experimental model. Many metaphors become models, experimental, scientific models. And then I ask for your help you will certainly now imagine what kind of traffic lights do we need in the digital environment. And how can we introduce children to the road of the law of the road, as you say, for the real roads in the real environment? We don't know. We are asking this question. But moral development is very important and doesn't go very easily. There are many steps. A first step normally is anomia, therefore conventional moral, and then post-conventional moral, as Kohlberg perfectly designed. There's enormous amount of work on moral development and ethics in children and young people in schools, enormous. But there are practically nothing about the moral development in the digital environment. And we all are concerned in families, etc. I hope that the introduction of, in this case in Uruguay, of tablets for the retired persons, about 400,000 have been distributed to now. Grandparents will be helping. Pope Francis speaks always about grandparents, how we should incorporate the knowing, the knowledge, and the understanding all people have about many things. And one of the first things we have observed in Uruguay is that many grandparents want to return to school, not only to learn something about the digital systems, but also to teach. But they have all their living there, their life that they can transmit to the children outside the normal curriculum. And the digital environment is very open to all that. This is the first idea. Then I hope you will understand this idea that we should have the equivalent of a traffic light system in the digital environment. After that, I'll stress the point that having such a large laboratory, and you are all invited to come and to contribute from any place in the world in this project, are the longitudinal studies. This is a very essential part of genetic epistemology, and Piaget taught us so much. I worked with him many years about how children develop, but everything was done in a very small scale. The first longitudinal study done by Piaget was done with his own children, 3. But now we can do that with 1 million. And for many years, the whole system permits us to follow up the development in any discipline of every child who enters public school in Uruguay. This is amazing. And this is a formidable tool we need to understand better in order to help them to develop what we said with a great urbanist, Kevin Lynch of MIT, growing up in cities. Growing up in cities is a book we produced in the 80s, or before perhaps, about this term, growing up in cities, and growing up in the digital environment. We don't know. We assume that they were up, but how? And this is a challenge too. But we can do that. We have all the tools in artificial intelligence, robotics, etc., to understand the way students start to navigate in the digital environment. Some of the classical studies were done with digital dilemmas. Somebody told us recently about the decision of robots to kill 1 or 2 persons, etc. The Heinz, the way Heinz dilemma of somebody who steals a drug in order to cure his wife who was dying of cancer. But these kinds of dilemmas are very artificial. Now we can have real dilemmas that we can perfectly present on the digital system in a very lively way and with videos, images, interaction. And this is not a story you are telling, but you are seeing and hearing and intervening. Therefore, the digital simulations of moral dilemmas is a point, and can be very, very important. I'm sorry Stan Dehan is not here today, now. Oh, you are there, sorry, Stan. I didn't know that you were here. But about the brain signatures of these ethical problems, like how is this in the global system you have described so well today, unconscious in 3 levels, stop? Where is that? How is processed that? Go, or something. Perhaps you have some ideas that we can do a lot of work with the portable systems we have today in schools to understand the way the brain processes all these kind of deontic laws, as we did it in language. Yes. And the conclusion is that towards a sustainable digital environment, we should work together in the social sciences, in biology, mathematics. We cannot do that alone. This is all. Thank you.